Hello and welcome to Stolen From Me. I'm Lindsay and I'm here for you loosely, on a Wednesday and a Sunday. Before we start, I would like to remind you all that every episode I cover comes with a big viewer discretion. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really does help my channel out, and I am grateful for every single one of you, as you always know. This week, we're going to take a look into a case that I don't normally cover, but I will be covering more of in the future. This is something that really does interest me, and I have some questions, so please feel free to comment your answers below. Now, Joanna Dennehy was described as a pathological liar with psychopathic tendencies. We're going to take a look into her life, and we're going to begin at her childhood. But before we do that, here's a brief little description of what she did. Joanna Dennehy, in March 2013, went on a killing spree for 10 days, brutally murdering 3 men and leaving their deceased bodies either in humiliating positions or just dumped them in a ditch. She then went on to further injure 2 other men. This isn't the kind of person you really want to run into, especially if you're a man. Joanna Dennehy's childhood was a good childhood. She was born in 1982 in August in Hertfordshire. She had a really loving, stable home, it's believed. Growing up, her parents, Kathleen and Kevin, her father, had stable jobs. She was really close to her younger sister, Maria, and it's actually said that they had a secret language together. They described Joanna as kind and caring. She loved the park like most kids do. She was always polite, never got in trouble, and she always came back from school with a great school report. Joanna was a really sensitive girl though. Like her mother said, she once stood on a bug and she cried all day. This would upset her for the rest of the day. She took it really badly. But as Joanna moved on into her teenage years, things changed. A dramatic turn in her behaviour seemed much more than a rebellious phase. Joanna had made friends with a group of older lads, which introduced her to weed and alcohol. At 13, she would truant from school, running away, get into trouble with the police on several occasions. She wouldn't listen to her parents anymore. She would turn up to school and exams drunk. She even jumped out of a window in her exam when she was completely intoxicated. Her behaviour was spiralling completely out of control, and her parents really didn't know what to do. They tried to lock her indoors to keep her safe from herself and others, but Joanna was not going to be tied down by anyone. In 1997, Joanna had formed a relationship with an older man. She met him when he was walking his dog, and she started up a conversation. Joanna was 15 years old, and John Treesnor, I think I'm saying that wrong, I'm sorry if I am. I'll probably put the name on the screen, was 20. So she was 15, he was 20. Kathleen and Kevin did not like their relationship at all. They didn't like John. They didn't want Joanna to be with John. But they were so desperate to see their child finish school and get a good education that they decided to invite John round the house for supper. Her parents thought the relationship would just fade out and he'd disappear and she'd come back and be her normal self. In fact, what happened was Joanna actually moved out with John. But John said that they actually lived on the streets in East Anglia for a while, and they didn't even get a property for quite some time. They then moved into a bedsit in Luton, then went to Milton Keynes in 2001. John did try to say that Joanna charmed him and he was under her spell, which kind of makes sense later on in the episode. But we have to remember this is a 20-year-old man and Joanna was a 15-year-old girl. Even though she's underage, nothing stopped their relationship. Joanna refused to listen to anyone. John did state that they never slept together until Joanna was 16, which is the age of consent in the UK. Their relationship was very toxic. Neighbours that lived near them and next to them all said that all they did all the time was argue quite violently. And it was Joanna that was violent all the time, basically. I never heard or read anywhere that John was violent, but I could be wrong. So Joanna was physically, emotionally, and mentally violent to John. He was actually scared of her. But then Joanna fell pregnant. Surprisingly, during her pregnancy, Joanna quit drinking, smoking, and doing drugs for the whole 9 months. She looked after her baby in her belly as best as you can, basically. Joanna then gave birth when she was 17 to a little baby girl. She was said that as soon as she gave birth and was on her way home from the hospital, Joanna went back to her old ways on the way home, getting high in the car. She was devastated she had kids. She never wanted them. She didn't have a maternal bone in her body. John would take care of their little girl. Joanna never bothered. On one occasion, actually, it said that Joanna was so intoxicated that she barged past her 3-year-old daughter and nearly knocked her down the stairs. She didn't even notice her because she was that out of her head. She would always either do drugs or drink or cheat on John. She would often spend several days out of the house at once, and then she'd beg him for forgiveness and so she could come back home. Joanna was then sectioned for a while and diagnosed with psychotic disorder. Joanna and John had split up for around 18 months. She disappeared like she always do. Joanna would do more drugs, get into trouble with the police on many occasions, but Joanna always found her way back to John. She would go back and beg him for forgiveness again, and then she became pregnant again for the second time. She did exactly the same thing again. She completely cleaned up her act. 100%, I said. And then, as soon as she had her other little girl, her second daughter, she reverted straight back to her old ways. Joanna self-harmed, and in many of the pictures you see of her, you can see just how badly she did this. In 2009, their relationship did break down, and this was because Joanna's behaviour became too much. She came home one day intoxicated with a knife tucked down her trousers. She said that she had the urge to kill someone and she had a needle sticking out of her arm. John feared for himself and his family, and he left Joanne. He took his daughters with him and he moved up north. Joanna then moved to Peterborough. Joanna would regularly be in and out of trouble and prison, and in 2011, she would meet the man that would follow her around. This is Gary Stretch. He was an impressive 7 foot 3 inches tall. Basically, Gary was Joanna's runner, and she treated him like a pet. He would do anything for her. He was completely loyal to Joanne, and I don't think she felt the same way about him, or anyone, really. In the meantime, she would serve community service for assault, and she would later be sentenced to a 14-week prison sentence for theft. Then in 2013, it's believed that she come out of prison and then she was like finding her feet again, and then she ended up meeting a man called Kevin Lee. He was a father of 2 and he was married, and he owned several properties called Quick Let. He would soon take a liking to Joanne, like most men do as soon as they come into contact with her. Joanne was able to get what she wanted out of men, and this was normally through sex. Kevin let out properties to people who were either coming out of prison or homeless or just struggling financially or couldn't get a reference. Basically, you could go to him and rent like a bedsit. A bedsit is just one room, by the way. Kevin was actually having problems with some of his tenants. They weren't able to keep up with payments. He would also have a soft spot for Joanna and wanted to help her. She made up this explosive story on how and why she was in prison. Joanna said that she ended up in prison for 8 years. She said that she killed her dad because he raped her. She then killed 2 other people by setting fire to their house and they died. And then she ran over someone with a car. I'm not really sure why she told him this story and what she thought she would gain out of it, but it worked, whatever it was, because he let her stay in his properties. She didn't say that she'd just served 14 weeks in prison for theft. No, she made up this massive story. Kevin just couldn't say no to Joanne, and even though he was married, and he told his wife that he wanted to help her and get her back on her feet, he just couldn't say no. He would actually let Joanne and Stretch stay at the property, and Joanna would end up working for Kevin, chasing up tenants who were late paying their rent or who just didn't pay. In fact, she was really good at this because she's aggressive, and she didn't care how violent she had to get. So Joanne and Stretch was able to live in a property that Kevin owned rent-free because she just worked for him instead. Joanna and Kevin started a sexual relationship, and under Joanna's spell, like most men do, Kevin fell deeply, including a Polish man called Lukasz Slabazeski. I hope I'm saying that right. He was 31 years old at the time he met Joanna, and he had taken an instant liking to her too. They began texting each other, and of course, with Joanna, everything turned sexual. Lukasz even told his friends that he had met a girl, and he believed that they were in a relationship, basically. He was falling deep and fast. On Thursday, the 21st of March 2013, Joanna texted Lukasz and invited him round for sex. When he turned up, he was so excited. He, like I said, believed that they were in a relationship. But without warning, Joanna grabbed the knife that she always carried around with her and stabbed Lukasz so hard through his heart, he died instantly. She then sat there and wondered what she was going to do with the body for a little while. But she thought the best thing to do would be to put him in a wheelie bin outside her house. And then she went round the neighbours and asked if they wanted to have a look at what she'd done. She was kind of showing off what she did. Poor Lukasz's body remained in the wheelie bins outside her house for 2 days until she decided what she needed to do with it. The first thing she decided is she needed a car to get rid of his body. So she called up Kevin Lee, who she rented the house from, and he actually bought Joanna a car. Now, Joanna and Stretch went to pick up the blue Vauxhall Astra, and then they disposed of Lukasz's deceased body. They finally found a place after driving for hours. Stretch used to live in the area of Thorny Dykes along a stream at the side of a field, which is believed to be quite a secluded area. In fact, there was no houses around, and Stretch and Joanna was so excited because they believed that they were so clever that they had found a place where nobody was going to discover the body. Not anyone. Joanna now had the taste for blood and murder. Nothing was going to stop her at all. Back at the property she rented, there was a man that lived close by. He was terrified of Joanna, and he would often tell neighbours that she was crazy and wanted to get rid of him on many occasions. And this was because he just didn't agree with how she was so violent and tried to get money for the rent, and the way she did it, he just didn't agree with her. John Chapman had served in the Royal Navy. He'd currently fell on hard times. It's said that he was an alcoholic, but everyone described him as such a kind man who had a drinking problem. He was around 50 years old, and he was scared of Joanne. In the early hours of Friday the 29th of March, which fell on Good Friday, a drug and alcohol-fueled Joanne went into John's room, where she viciously stabbed John in the neck, severing his carotid artery. She then stabbed him 5 times in the chest. 2 of the stab wounds penetrated his heart, and 1 stab wound was so violent it passed through his chest bone. Because John was so intoxicated, he was maybe like 4 or 5 times over the drinking limit, and when Joanna actually killed him, he was asleep at the time. Joanna then had to think on how she was going to dispose of John's body, so she called up her friend Stretch and said, "Oops, I've done it again." They were her actual words. There was a man called Leslie Layton and apparently another man, but that's not confirmed fully. And it wasn't Stretch, so we'll just say Leslie was involved. Now, Leslie, he had taken photographs of John Chapman's deceased blood-stained body. Joanna now had John's body to dispose of, but before she could do that, she had the need to kill again. Her need was so great that was even greater than getting rid of the body. But who's going to be on her list? Who do you think is next? Joanna was at home, where she actually killed Lukasz, and she texted Kevin Lee. She asked him to come round and she promised him sex. She said that she had a dress that she wanted him to put on and she wanted to rape him. Their sexual relationship was based on Joanna's sexual fantasies, which she was later diagnosed as suffering from a condition called paraphernalia sadomasochism, which is basically means that she is sexually excited from inflicting pain on others or herself while having sex. She likes to humiliate people and get off on the darker forms of bondage. In March 2013, Kevin went to see Joanne. She would stab Kevin 5 times in the chest, which penetrated his lungs and heart. Kevin also had defense wounds where he tried to stick up for himself, but Joanna was determined and ultimately he was no match for her. It isn't clear whether he had arrived and they had begun their sexual relationship, or if Joanna dressed him afterwards, because Kevin was wearing the black sequin dress that Joanna wanted him to wear. When Joanna and Stretch disposed of Kevin's deceased body in a remote location on the outskirts of Peterborough, it's called the Cambridge Fens, they left him in a humiliating position, laying in a ditch face down. He had a black sequin dress on with his buttocks uncovered and pointing in the position where it was clearly visible to see. Meanwhile, Leslie Layton, he would drive Kevin's car to Yaxley and set it on fire. Now, this was quite a distance between the two, and it was tried to distract, so they thought the car was so far away, Kevin might be in that area, but he wasn't. They then go back to Joanne's in her car and collect John's deceased body. They then dispose of his body with confidence in the same place as they put Lukasz's body. No one had yet discovered Lukasz, and they were so confident that no one would ever find either of them, they left the bodies quite close together. Joanna was looking for a place to hide. She knew it wouldn't be long before the police start noticing people going missing and link them to her in some way or other. So she went to stay with a friend called Robert Moore, and she stayed around there for a little while. He actually gave Joanne tarpaulin to wrap John's body in previously when she dumped him. It's said that a dog walker on his usual route, he was just strolling along and he sadly made the horrific discovery of Kevin Lee's body. Kevin had no ID on him, but police soon linked him to either Joanna or Stretch. And then they actually thought it was more Stretch than Joanna, until the phone record showed Joanna and Kevin were linked quite intimately, and she was the last person basically he contacted. So forensics got to work and they actually found bloodstains in her property, even though it had been cleaned with either bleach or some cleaning agent. We all know that that's not going to work, don't we? 2 different DNAs were actually found in the property. One matched Kevin Lee and the other DNA matched Lukasz Slabazeski. I'm sorry if I say that name wrong. Now, the police were interested in speaking to Joanne and Stretch, but the two had decided to go to Hereford, which was around 140 miles away or 220 kilometres away from Peterborough, so quite a distance. Joanna was sort of fueled by alcohol and drugs as usual. Along the way to Hereford, Joanna and Stretch had burgled houses to get money, one in Norfolk and one in Hertfordshire. While they were on the road, they were also taking photographs. This was a little bit bizarre. So they were taking photographs like they were on holiday. They were having the time of their lives in these pictures, sort of posing in like countryside and just looked like they were on holiday. They now needed to sell the stolen goods that they stole from the flat, and Stretch knew some people that he thought he could sell the goods to. One man was called Mark Lloyd. All three of them, so Joanna, Stretch and Mark Lloyd, went in Joanna's car and they planned to get some more money. But Joanna had other ideas. She just couldn't wait any longer. She wanted to kill again, and she turned to Stretch and said, "You've had your fun now. Now it's my turn." Joanna was fueled by the lust of killing innocent people, and being intoxicated only made her lust for murder even more poignant. Mark Lloyd sat uncomfortably in the back seat of the car, just looking at Joanna. Joanna was sitting in the front taking photographs at every opportunity she could, and Stretch was driving to a remote area which is well known for dog walkers. Stretch then kept to his word. He said to Joanne, "What about that man?" And he pointed to a man walking his dog. He then pulled up behind the man. Joanna then got out of the car and walked up to the 63-year-old retired fireman, Robin Bereza. Now this man, Robin, he was just walking his dog on the 2nd of April, and Joanna ran up to him, approached him from behind and viciously stabbed him in the back and the arm. Robin actually thought that she was punching him, and as he turned round and asked what on earth she was doing, he saw Joanna covered in his own blood. She said, "I want to hurt you. I am going to fucking kill you." Robin tried to defend himself by fighting her off, and luckily a car come round the corner at the same time. Robin would have damage to his walled chest, and his lungs was badly bruised. His ribs were fractured, and as well as his arm was fractured. There was stab wounds in his arm as well, and his shoulder blade. Joanna would return to the car very calmly and smile. Mark was horrified at what he just witnessed. She had told Mark that she had killed 3 men and she intended to kill 9 men. Joanna was a monster, and Mark was in the car with her. Robin was laying on the floor, bleeding out, fighting for his life, and Joanna just didn't care as she drove past him in the car. Luckily, Robin survived from his injuries, but Joanna now craved yet another man. She would state previously to Stretch that she did not want any women, and definitely no women with children. She was very clear on her instructions. She only wanted to kill men, which I find interesting. Less than 9 minutes later, Stretch was driving down the road, which was close to his grandma's house, and he pointed to another dog walker. John Rogers was 56. He was walking his dog, and Joanna jumped out of the car. Stretch and Mark were watching. She attacked John from behind, stabbing him in the back. He then turned around just like Robin did, but she continued to stab him in the chest so viciously that he fell to the floor. He could not even hold up his own weight. Joanna showed him no mercy, and she continued stabbing him so badly. She stabbed him around 30 times. He was laying on the floor in a pool of his own blood. Joanna actually thought he was dead. She then stole his dog and went back to the car. But thankfully, John survived by a miracle of his injuries. He had 9 broken ribs. His lungs were collapsed. He had stab wounds to his chest, abdominal and his back, and his stab wounds was in his hands and his arms. Now, I'm not sure which one, but it is said that one of the men who was stabbed, Robin or John, managed to actually get home and call the police. The police and the ambulance crew did turn up. I don't know which one called him, but the most important part is they survived. And then they said that this was a lady that committed these horrendous crimes, and she had a star tattooed on her face. So she's going to be very distinctive. Police launched a nationwide manhunt and they used CCTV footage to track down the car, which was actually done because they managed to find the car on CCTV cameras and they saw it at a petrol station. Now, Stretch was in the car. Joanna was sitting in the car seat with Mark in the back, and the police noticed the car and the number plates and then saw Joanna there. They saw her tattoo and they went over to her and made an arrest. She didn't try once to fight with them. She didn't try to argue with them. She just accepted it and went. It is said that Stretch did try to run off. He tried to run off. But he's 7'3" tall, 2.2 meters. He's not built for speed. So he obviously didn't get far. When Joanna was arrested, it seemed all fun and games to her. She didn't care at all. She was flirting and laughing with the police officers. She showed absolutely no remorse. She asked what her charges was, and the police said murder and attempted murder. She then replied, "Oh, that's nothing. It's like going down for a Sunday roast. Easy." Joanna just didn't care. While she was being interviewed by police, she kept saying no comment when they asked about the murders she had committed. But later, in November in 2013, in court, Joanna actually pleaded guilty to 3 men and 2 attempted murders on John and Robin. The court hearing saw how a 10-day killing spree, only by Joanna, was so viciously in the direction of men, and she wasn't going to stop. If she wouldn't have been caught, she wasn't going to stop. Stretch was sentenced to life imprisonment, but he would have to serve a minimum of 19 years in prison. Leslie Layton, he was sentenced to 14 years, and a third accomplice, Robert Moore, 55 he admitted assisting an offender and received a 3-year sentence. On the day Joanna was actually sentenced, Judge Mr. Justice Spencer told the Old Bailey, "Within the space of 10 days, you murdered 3 men in cold blood. Although you pleaded guilty, you've made it quite clear you show no remorse." He then added, "You are cruel, calculating, selfish, and manipulative." Mr. Justice Spencer sentenced Joanna to a whole life term, meaning she will never, ever be released. During her sentencing, she laughed and smirked. Basically, she did that through her whole court procedure. She just didn't care. In court, it was heard how Joanna was actually excited of the reports that came into her that police were hunting her down. As graphic and bizarre details of her acts, they were detailed by the judge, and Joanna found this hilarious. She laughed and smiled. She told a psychiatrist that, "I killed to see how it feel, to see if I'm as cold as I thought I was. Then it got moreish." Joanna was later diagnosed by a psychologist with psychopathic antisocial emotional instability disorder. It's said that Joanna is one of the most lethal women in English criminal history. Now, when she was on remand, prison staff found an escape plan in her diary, which involved her either killing a prison officer or hurting him quite seriously. She thought that she was going to cut off his finger, and then with the amputee finger, she was going to go on the biometric system in the prison and be able to escape. But this was a nay-nay. It didn't happen because she was caught with the plans and then sent to solitary confinement in September. Now, Joanna did not like this at all because why would she? She would not be able to play up for anyone and get all the attention. So she claimed that being in isolation made her tearful and upset and led her to self-harm. A high court rejected Joanna's claims of her human rights being violated, and they slung her out of court. Well done. It's then said in 2018, she launched a bid to marry her cellmate, Hayley Palmer. So the prison did respond well to this and said yes, but Hayley's family said no. And they thought that Joanna was going to hurt Hayley, or Joanna and Hayley would commit suicide together. So they just didn't want their daughter anywhere near Joanna. There was also talk a couple of years later that Joanna had met someone else, and this girl was in prison for 20 years because she killed a man and dumped his body. Then that all died down, and Joanna and Hayley was back together basically, and they were intending to get married. But in 2019, it is said that Joanna was moved to Low Newton Prison in County Durham, and then she arrived and saw a person who she hated. She wanted to kill her. Now, I don't condone any violence, but if Joanna was ever to change sides and turn on women, this woman would be one of my top 5 to choose. It is said that this woman actually had to be removed from that prison and moved to another prison for her own safety, which is quite funny. We'll talk about it. First of all, I have some questions. So, do you think anything happened to Joanne when she was 13 as her personality completely flipped? Do you feel like she was abused or anyway, although there's absolutely no evidence saying that she was abused? It is said that she did hate men. She didn't want to hurt women or children. She did like to humiliate men, and she was very sexual, wasn't she? Although friends of Joanne, when she was out of prison, did say that she was basically a bully to them. So she may not hurt and kill women, but she did treat them like shit anyway. So I wonder if something happened to her to make her do a complete 360 on her behaviour, or is it just inside her brain? I don't know. I'm asking you. Another thing I found interesting is that she gave up smoking completely. Smoking, drinking and drugs when she was pregnant. It's like that she knew she could not be a mother. She knew it. She knew there was no way she could be a mother. But the only thing she could ever offer or do for her children was to give them a safe place to grow while she was pregnant with them. So I feel like she gave up all the bad stuff just to offer them the only thing she could offer. Because once they were out and here in front of them, she knew that the way she was definitely not someone who could be a mother. So I feel like that's why she gave up. Because why would you care if you hated kids, you didn't want kids, you just don't want to be a mother? Why would you even care to give up everything if you didn't care about your kids? I don't understand. Let me know your thoughts. Also, pop quiz. Okay, so I was going to do a pop quiz and ask if you knew who the UK's 3 women who were sentenced to a full life term in prison was. But me being me, I forgot to do it at the beginning of the episode. So I'm just going to tell you. So the 3 women are obviously Joanna Dennehy, because we just heard her case. The next one, no particular order, was Moira Hindley, who helped Ian Brady in the infamous Moors murder. And then another one was Rosemary West, who helped her husband torture and murder 9 young women. Maybe more. The funny thing is, if there is anything funny to take out of this, that when Joanna was moved to prison, she bumped into Rosemary West. Now, when she saw Rosemary West, she instantly was filled with rage and wanted to kill her. So much aggression she must have had that the prison officers took her by word and actually moved Rosemary West out of that prison and into another prison away from Joanna, which I find highly amusing because someone who tortured and killed, brutally tortured and killed young girls was now being protected by someone who could just destroy her completely. I think personally that they should have put her in a cell with Joanne and let nature take its course. But there you go. Thank you all so much for sticking around if you're still here. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I know it's not my regular kind of episode, but I will be taking a look into different cases and expanding my channel, as well as keeping up to date with what I normally do. I just wanted to try this out and see how you feel about it, and please let me know in the comments. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you on Wednesday for my bite-sized version of the news. Take care. Much love, Lindsay.